Hi, my name's Cathy Carey, and I'm going to be talking about color theory. I'm going to be starting with some basic techniques and ideas. I'm getting the ideas from the book I wrote called The Philosophy of Color, and it's a workbook, and it's meant for students to fill in with their different mediums. And then in the back of the book, there's a CD, and you can put it in your computer, and you can see all the different pages in color. So a lot of the sheets that we're going to be looking at will be things that came from this workbook. So let's get started. What I'd like to start with is the idea of vocabulary and terminology. And the reason I like to start with this is because you're going to need to communicate to yourself and maybe to your audience what it is you're trying to achieve through your color theory. What I base my color theory ideas on is something called atmospheric perspective. And you've probably heard of a linear perspective, which we'll go into that concept a little bit later. But atmospheric perspective is when the idea of an object as it moves away from you in space changes color. In linear perspective, as an object moves away from you in space, the size of it is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller to indicate on this flat plane that the object is moving away from you. Well, one of the things that can happen in a student painting, if they're not really aware of color theory, is that if they don't change the color as that object moves away from you, it doesn't look that realistic. It can look kind of flat, like it's hanging in space. So that's what this type of color theory is based on, is atmospheric perspective. First, we're going to start with vocabulary. So when we talk about the word hue, hue is just another way of saying color. So we're going to use 6 basic hues to determine the color of something. And those hues are going to be yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, and green. 3 of these colors are called primary colors, and those are yellow, red, and blue. And these are colors that you can't make by mixing any of these other 6 colors together. You have to start with these 3 primary colors. The second grouping of colors are called secondary colors, and they're orange, purple, and green. And these colors are made by mixing 2 of the primary colors together. So when we mix together yellow and red, we get orange. When we mix together red and blue, we get purple. And when we mix together yellow and blue, we get green. So these are called secondary colors because it takes 2 of the primary colors to make these colors. So 3 primary colors, 3 secondary colors is how we get our group of hues. Another vocabulary word that becomes important is the idea of tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are colors that occur in between primary and secondary colors. So in between yellow and orange, we have colors, hundreds of colors that might be yellow, orange, orange, yellow. They might have white added to them. They might have some gray added to them. And I like to call these colors the Home Depot colors, because when you go to paint your house, and you go and you get a color chip strip from Home Depot, these colors always have really interesting names like antelope brown and ocean aqua wave and these different fun names like that. You're going to have different names like peach, dandelion, apricot, salmon, or some of the different names that you're going to encounter with tertiary colors. Primary and secondary colors are always going to be yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, and green. Once they start to have one of these interesting names to it, you're starting to get into the tertiary color world. And if you look around, most of the world is tertiary colors. There's very few things that are straight yellow, orange, red, blue, purple, and green. So that's why it becomes important for us to know how to mix colors, because we're trying to mix these tertiary colors. So in between a primary and a secondary color, we've got these tertiary colors. Next on our vocabulary chart is the idea of complementary colors. Now complementary colors, we'll go back to our color chart, are colors that can be found opposite each other on a color chart. So we have yellow and purple, we have red and green, and we have orange and blue. The way I like to teach color theory, though, is so that you can know these things automatically and not just have to look at a color chart every time you want to think of what colors are complements for each other. So I'll be talking a little bit later on about some easy ways to remember them. But basically, you go back to your original primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And if we have the color yellow, of our primary colors, the 2 colors that are left are red and blue. Red and blue mixed together are purple. And so purple is the complement to yellow, because complementary colors are colors that don't have anything to do with each other. So there's no red or blue in yellow, and there's no yellow in purple. And the same thing with the red and green complementary pair. If we start with red, the missing two primary colors are yellow and blue, which make green. When we look at our orange and blue complementary pair, orange is made up of yellow and red. Those colors together make orange. The remaining primary color is blue, which is the complement to orange. So we'll talk about this further later, but there's two wonderful things that complements do for you. Because they are so different from each other, when they sit next to each other like this, they create a focal point. A focal point is the part of a picture or your artwork or sculpture, whatever you're working on, where you want people to look. It's the main point of the picture. It's the area that the eye travels to. It might be the title of the artwork. It's the communication of the idea of what the entire artwork is really about. And that's the focal point. One of the ways to create a focal point is by putting complements next to each other. But there's a lot of different ways to create focal points. The thing to bear in mind is that things need to be really different from each other in your focal point area. You could have a focal point created with texture, with color, with lines. So there's lots of different ways to create focal points. This is just one of them. Another thing that complementary colors are going to give you that's very important is the idea of neutralized colors. When you mix together two complementary colors, you're going to get a neutralized color. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But a neutralized color is a color that is brown or gray. So these are all neutralized colors. And we created those by mixing together two pairs of the complements. So we'll talk about that in just a minute in depth. And then the last word that we want to get to on our vocabulary is the idea of analogous colors. Analogous colors are different than complementary colors in that they are colors that are similar in some way. It's as if they are creating a family together. So when you look at analogous colors, they have a harmony together. When you look at complementary colors, they're a balance of colors. They're two opposite colors that are different from each other, and then depending on the way you use them, you're creating an idea of balance. But analogous colors are creating harmony, just like voices together come together to create a harmony in music. So a few different examples of this would be yellow, yellow-green, and green. The thing that these three colors all have in common is the color yellow. There's yellow and yellow-green, and there's also yellow and green. Green is made up of yellow and blue. These colors are also next to each other on the color chart. We've got yellow, yellow-green, and green. So that makes these colors analogous, harmonious, and similar. They don't always create a calm point of view. You could create a analogous color system using warm colors too, like yellow, orange, and red. So that's a grouping of the three warm colors over here. So that's going to give you a really different feeling than a painting created with, say, these three colors. And my other example is blue, green, and purple. So we've got blue, green, and purple, which are the cool colors. And they all have blue in them. There's blue and green, of course blue, and then also blue is in purple. So those are our vocabulary words that we want to think about as we're mixing colors and examining the world to determine how we're going to create colors. Okay, so that finishes up that first section. So let's take a moment to think about it, and then we'll move on to the next part.